and special media reporter Mariama Diallo. Take it away, Mariama.
Thanks, Shaka. The U.S. State Department, created in 1789, is the oldest cabinet-level agency in the executive branch. It largely consists of diplomats and foreign service officers who carry out American foreign policy throughout the world. 6 assistant secretaries who report to the Undersecretary for Political Affairs manage diplomatic missions within their designated geographic regions. That leads us to our question of the week, which asks, what should be the top priorities for the next U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs? Well, we'll go right to it, and we'll begin with a comment from Bishop Christopher Luanda Tusubira from Makerere University in the Ugandan capital, Kampala, who says, I would like to see the next U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs help enforce democracy and the restoration of presidential term limits in all the African countries. Another one comes from Esau Chonde Simutoe from Belgorod State University, guess what, all the way in Russia. He writes, the top priorities should be to encourage peace and unity among Africans. We'd like to see the U.S. provide technical and moral support where necessary without interfering in the affairs of the local people and help foster a good environment for socio-economic development to stop Africa's dependence on foreign aid. Well, Shaka, from these 2 messages, it seems like help is needed in fostering democracy, socio-economic development, and less dependence on foreign aid. Shaka?
Well, I have to say that, Mariama, I've also been receiving a lot of mail, and in fact, even telephone calls sometimes saying, you know what, the United States seems to talk the talk, but actually does not seem to walk the talk so that people can walk the walk, especially when it comes to democracy. How do you respond to that, for example, Ambassador John Carson? Because frankly, when they look at democracy, like you talked about Uganda, the elections you are talking about may be certified fine, but there are a lot of people, frankly, who say they are reflections of creative accounting. The man comes and says, I brought you democracy, but a lot of people are actually saying that the democracy that obtains in that country and a lot of countries across the continent, frankly, is something that can be characterized as a government of some people, by some people, for some people. How do you respond to that?
I think that the trajectory for democracy and the values of democracy is moving upward. Consistently in the polling data that we see across the continent, people in Africa want democracy. They want an opportunity to select their leaders. They want an opportunity to participate in the decision-making of their governments. Increasingly, we see a score of countries holding regularly multi-party elections. We see leaders, sitting leaders, turned out of office by the ballot box. We see leaders dying in office and peacefully replaced by their successors. We see leaders succeeding other leaders in their parties and taking over. And we see election monitoring and observation, not just by regional organizations, but by international organizations. I don't know a leader in Africa today who would stand up and say that he is anything other than a democratic leader. And this is the power and testament. We're not talking about 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 countries. We're talking about dozens of countries. And I think that we not only talk the talk, but we walk the walk. And I think the last 4 years we've demonstrated it.
I'll come back to that.